I love it. Well, it's great to meet you. Thank you so much for taking a minute out today. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm honored to be here.
Yeah, this is great. So before we get into your life of helping people process money, being a money mindset coach, I want to know, surviving this pandemic, how much of living through that time period has sent seismic waves through what you do right now?
Ooh, wow, that is such a fantastic question. Um, so during the pandemic, I had a really unique experience because since I am a mindset coach, I'm constantly searching for shifting narratives and I'm constantly searching for societal narratives just to see what the tide is going to do and what I might need to protect my community against. And on day one of the pandemic, I saw the narrative money will slow down
Yeah,
coming out of the news reporters' mouths. And I was like, literally word for word. And I was like, how do you know?
yeah,
What you've done is you've created a prediction and you've created a fear. And when the brain believes something, it will create it.
yeah,
And so now what you've done is you have made that a truth because people believe what they hear on the news.
yeah,
So I was like, well, crap. So I went to work essentially bulletproofing my community against that narrative that money's going to slow down. And they witnessed some miraculous results. Some of them made twice as much money, 5 times as much money, 10 times as much money during the pandemic in industries that were shut down, that they had no business making
yeah,
simply because they didn't believe that their money was going to slow down.
yeah,
Now, what's when you talk about the seismic ripples of the aftermath, it's very, very similar, Joe,
yeah,
because because during the 2 years of the pandemic, the economists started saying, "Okay, guys, get ready because we're about to move into a recession."
yeah,
And so what they did was start planting the seeds of belief about us moving into recession. And so even though there's 4 times more money in the global economy circulating now than there was before COVID, people are very hesitant to spend it because there's this very languid feeling around money because of the fear that's been created about there's no money right now. Well, there's 4 times more money.
yeah,
It's just that, um, you know, it's become a self-fulfilling prophecy. Of course, as it does, because the mind creates whatever it believes, regardless. And that happens on a societal level. So if society believes this, that is what our experience is going to be. And
yeah,
so that one has actually been a little bit more challenging to bulletproof
yeah,
because I was already working on like you're going to be fine during this pandemic and you're
yeah,
going to come out smelling like roses. And I didn't prep for, and it's going to keep going and it's going to get worse and worse over the next couple of years. So now I feel like I'm retroactively having to do like some major cleanup in my community as they're buying into. Now, does that mean that people aren't slowing down? Of course they're slowing down. Like, yes, they're slowing down with their purchasing decisions. People are taking not taking as many risks in business or in their real life. Like people are not doing as much investments. They're watching for, what's happening in the economy. They're taking their cues from other people. So it's a reality, right? Like
yeah,
when you look at the market, you can't stand there and say, this is fake. No, 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 no. It's very, very real. The experience of it is very, very real. What's fake is that there's plenty of money. It doesn't have to be real, but it is.
yeah.
Does
So
that make sense?
I'm curious. It's almost like you instilled this manifest destiny in your clients
Mm-hmm.
for them to believe something and then it actually came to fruition. Is that kind of the
Yes.
philosophical or psychological approach?
Yes, exactly. That's
Yeah,
exactly it. Yes, yes, yes. So the fascinating thing about the brain, and I think since we're not really taught about the brain, we don't know how to leverage it.
yeah,
Most of us feel at the mercy of our brain, of our beliefs, of our emotions. We feel, when we don't necessarily know how to control ourselves when we get hijacked whether it's by cravings or addiction or just really, really strong emotions. We're just not really taught any of this stuff. And so we feel very like, I don't know what's happening with my brain and body, but I'm just going to do my best and I hope that it's going to work out.
Yeah.
And the fascinating thing about how the mind works is it controls everything.
Yeah.
The brain controls everything in our body and it creates what it believes. And I'm not talking about like some woo woo spiritual principles.
Right.
I'm talking about um, our brain has the capacity and does filter out 10 over 10 million pieces of information per second. And of those pieces of information that are filtered out, anything that doesn't align with what the brain believes is filtered out. So if the brain has a belief that says, my money is going to slow down because it's the holidays, which a lot of people have. A lot of people have that belief. If the brain says, my money's going to slow down, anything in our surrounding environment that contradicts that belief is canceled.
Yeah.
We won't see opportunity. We won't hear about opportunity. We won't notice stories of people who make all their money in December and don't work the 11 months of the year, right? Our brain just cancels out anything that contradicts with that belief. And that's why I love what I do so much because once you switch that belief to something else,
Yeah.
once you take that, my money's going to slow down, and you go, you know what? Maybe I'll make more money in December than I've ever made in my life. And you pop that belief into
Yeah.
the brain, that's what the brain puts all of its resources behind. Those are all the opportunities, all the creative inspiration, right? All of the energy, all of the everything. You there's some physics and some astrophysics in play as well, which we won't super dive into. But yeah, like when you say the brain creates what it believes, that is true to the nth degree. There are some really scary stories of results that people's brains have created simply because they believed them. And then there are some incredible, unbelievable stories that people, have experienced because their brain believed it. And so all you have to do is change what the brain believes.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's it.
That's wonderful. So if I was to put you in front of a bunch of grade school kids right now and they wanted
Yes,
to know exactly what you do for a living,
yes,
Johnny in the back of the room says, "Hey, what do you do for a living?" What's your answer?
yes. Grade school. Let
Yeah.
me take out some of my more verbose language. I help people think differently about money.
So, what did you want to be in the third grade? What was your dream?
My dream was save the world.
Okay. And you're
Yes.
doing that. I mean,
Thank you.
money's a big deal. I mean, and
Yeah.
it's one of those things that people aren't really, it's like there's this weird relationship between like relationships and love and money and the way that we administer it. It's two of the biggest things in our lives that we all go for whenever we get older. But we're historically bad and then get good, or we're bad and we get better. You know what I'm saying? It's this teeter
Yes.
totter.
Yes. Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah. Essentially, what's happening is that our brain has a certain threshold of how much good, which includes love. And that was so insightful. Most people don't notice that connection, right? And that
Yeah.
includes love, that includes happiness, that includes money, resources, freedom, right? Our brain has a certain threshold of how much good we're allowed to receive. And Dr. Joe Dispenza calls it the thermostat, body's thermostat. Gay Hendricks calls it the upper limit, right? So our body allows us to receive a certain threshold of good and a certain threshold of bad. So
Yeah.
it'll also not allow us to let things get too bad. And so that's why we're on this roller coaster. Because what happens when we hit the top of the threshold, everything in our body and brain reads that as unsafe. It feels as if we've wandered into territory where we will now be attacked by saber-toothed tigers. Like When we say unsafe, we are talking about the brain reads that as a life threat.
Yeah.
And so, what does the brain do? It uses whatever it can to stop you from going into the unsafe territory, which looks like sabotage. It looks like self sabotage, right? It looks like procrastination, overwhelm, loss of interest, apathy, confusion, forgetfulness, right? So the brain uses all of these really incredible, very effective techniques to stop our forward motion. And then naturally, we just start to come back down because when we stop doing the actions that got us up there, it's naturally going to bring us back down again.
Yeah.
And then we get to the bottom, and all of a sudden, the brain goes, oh, time to get back into gear. And then our motivation comes back and our creativity, and we feel like we're waking up again. We're like, oh, I don't know what I was doing for the last X amount of weeks or months or years, but all of a sudden, I'm inspired, right? And so this is the thing that's happening behind the scenes. Now, it's not that we want to try to control the ebb and flow, right? Ebb and flow is just a natural part of life, very much like what you said about the seasons changing, right? Like
Yeah.
we would we can't be in summer all the time.
Yeah.
That would be exhausting, right? If you're in Alaska, you're never getting any sleep. It's sun 24/7. Like, oh, no, we can't be in sun. We can't always be on. That's when people hit burnout and adrenal fatigue. So we have to go through these ebbs and flows of energy shifting. But what I assist my clients with is that the ebbs and flows trend upward.
Yeah.
So it's not a roller coaster that is always the same height. It's a roller coaster that is trending upwards. So the highs are always higher and the lows are always higher.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
Mm.
So, how did you get to this point? Take me back to where you were born and raised. How did you acquire this financial acumen, minced with psychology,
Yeah,
sociology, all of these things that help
yeah.
your clients out so much?
Yeah. That is quite the story. I'll keep it brief.
Yeah,
I was born in South Africa, and then I spent 8 years in England, and that's where my kind of hodgepodge accent comes from.
yeah,
When I was in South Africa, it's a third world country, and so we we lived we lived in various levels of poverty versus wealth, but it was extremely abusive. So my early childhood, I experienced a lot of very like traumatic experiences. When I moved to England, I was in foster care actually for most of my time in England. And then once I emancipated, things actually got harder. I was a single mom. I ended up homeless 4 times.
wow,
Um, and finally, at the age of, it was right before my 30th birthday, I realized I had kind of a come to Jesus moment with myself. And I realized I still wasn't taking responsibility for my behavior. I became homeless because I kind of had moved into this place of entitlement where my life has been so hard, someone needs to come and rescue me from it now because I can't do it.
yeah,
And that's when so I started as a hypnotherapist and I won best hypnotherapist in Los Angeles the first 5 years in business. Um, but I still wasn't breaking through $6,000 a month. And if you're familiar with California, in California, if you make $6,000, you still have to have a roommate. Like you can't
yeah,
even afford to live by
yeah,
yourself
yeah,
on 6,000.
yeah,
So I was like, all right, this is, I was booked 6 months out. I always had people calling me and I couldn't figure out like why I was stuck at this income threshold. I had hit my upper limit, right?
yeah,
Like we talked about. And so I had the intuitive hit that I needed to start working on my money mindset. And then another intuitive hit that I got was as I was working on my money mindset, I was going to be supporting others. And although that didn't feel like a smart choice because I just didn't feel very comfortable in my own in my own experience to support people through their money mindset. But it was giving some really strong signals that this was it. So I started this course called Millionaire Mindset Mastery and enrolled a bunch of people. And within 5 months, they had made over $47 million.
wow,
Right. Most of them started at less than $5,000. And
wow,
so Yeah, it was absolutely insane. I never could have predicted. I was just like, "Oh my God, let someone in some period of time hit $1 million so that I'm not a fraud," right? Like
Yeah.
I'm like, oh gosh, please let this work for at least one person so I can say, like, all right, I can stand behind my product. But yeah, so many of them popped off.
Yeah.
And some of them popped off in a big way. Like some of them were landing by the end of the year, they'd made over $125 million. People who came in not being able to pay their bills started telling me about billion-dollar deals that they were now a part of, that
Wow.
they had like tripped over and fallen into. And they were like, Abby, I don't know how this is happening. And I was like, yeah, me neither, man.
Yeah.
Me neither.
Yeah.
All I know is that I know my set of skills, which is in the mind.
Yeah.
And I started to incorporate some manifestation techniques as well, because I just always done it on my own life.
Yeah.
Not always well, but when it started to work, it really worked. So then it just kind of built from there, and now we're 5 years later. My clients have made over 1.5 billion. I just stopped counting, honestly, because it just got overwhelming.
Yeah.
It started to hit my level of my upper limit of what I could support people with creating. I was like,
Yeah.
all right, I'm
Yeah.
tapping out.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so that's
That's
kind of
great.
like, yeah, it's nuts. It's
That's
absolutely bonkers.
so who's been that motivator? Who's been that hero for you that's allowed you to be so successful?
Oh, thank you for asking that question. I've always had, ever since it took me getting a coach in order to hit my first six figures in business.
Yeah.
And then a different coach in order to hit my seven figures. But there were times in my life where I had nine coaches at one time, all for different things. Like maybe I had four business coaches that were all supporting me in different aspects of my business. And then I had a spiritual coach and a trauma processing coach and a therapist and a physical trainer, like,
Yeah.
and a masseuse who also did meditations, right? So like once I got a coach, I realized for me that I think it's actually harder for people who are more intelligent, because we can really F with ourselves mentally. We can really justify, explain away. We can convince ourselves like better than anybody else on this planet.
Hmm.
And so I realized really early on, once I had my first coach, that without definitely a cheerleader, but at least someone to like mirror back the BS that I was spinning for myself,
Yeah.
at least someone to call me out on, like, hey, you're letting this be true, and this couldn't be further from the truth. So you need to deal with this.
Yeah.
Like, that is really what oh, I mean, I just would have stayed in my own way without them.
Yeah.
Like I just wouldn't have moved beyond my own bullshit, if
Yeah.
I hadn't have had people in my corner, for sure.
Yeah. So
Hmm.
how do you balance this life of you have to give a lot of yourself to help your clients get to a better place. And it's not just money, it's their whole existence. But
Right.
you also are a human being and a
Yes.
professional with a life too. How do you balance taking care of both of those at a high level?
Wow, that's beautiful. I love that. I early on in my career, actually when I was in school for hypnosis, one of my teachers was a also a father. And so he told us one day that he worked 3 days a week. And the rest of the time he spent with his family, and his wife worked full time. So he was almost like, a stay-at-home dad, except for he made all his money on 3 days a week, and he made well over six figures. And I'd never, that concept had never occurred to me, because I
Yeah.
was raised with it. 1 hour equals X amount of dollars, and that's it.
Yeah.
Right. And so in that moment, I was like, I want that life. I want that life. I want 3 days a week working, 4 days a week, whatever.
Yeah.
Rest, spending it with my kiddo, fun, play, taking care of the house, whatever. It took me 5 years to create it. And I did it bit by bit. I started with taking afternoons off and then Mondays and then Fridays. Um, but yeah, essentially now I'm at the point where my schedule is I work Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. I work about 5 hours. And I just have it structured. Like over time, I was able to raise my one-on-one rate where it allowed for me to only see, 2 to 4 clients per week. And then I started a couple of group programs. And then I hired some coaches to support me for the in between support. And so it certainly wasn't an overnight creation. There was a time where I was working 5 days a week, 8 hours a day. But then over time, I was able to um, create this schedule for myself, which definitely works for me.
Yeah. So of
Yeah.
all of these things that you've done and evolved into at this point, what are you the proudest of?
Oh, well, number one, my kid.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Oh, I know it's such a cop out, but honestly, like they have become an incredible human,
Yeah,
regardless of us being homeless 4 times, regardless of the trauma that they've experienced. Like they are absolutely incredible.
yeah,
And then second, I am just incredibly proud that I can be a space where people can come and they can have significant changes in their life like that. It's that like that's getting choked up here. Like that's what I dreamed of since I was 8 years old. And the
yeah,
fact that you know I just barely broke into my 40s and I can say that I am living my dream career like that. I'm just so grateful and proud. Like it's I certainly like I've been doing this for 11 years. I didn't trip over into it. And it magically came together. Like I
yeah.
definitely worked for it. So thank you for those questions. That was
Yeah.
beautiful.
So let me ask you this. Everyone has a
Yeah.
perception of you. Family, friends, clients,
Yeah.
everyone that you work with, but you run the show. What's your
Right.
perception of you? Who do you think you are?
It's hilarious. Oh my gosh. I would say I probably have the worst perception of me than anyone who knows me. And that's my constant edge, right? That's what I'm constantly working on is my perception of myself is like, what? Me? Little old me? What do I have to offer? And I I have to create mechanisms to remind myself who I am and what I'm capable of because when I come into the world from this like demure, who me kind of position, people aren't actually hearing my message. I
Yeah,
actually have to come into the world with like, hey man, this is who I am. This is what I can do for you. And you're in or you're out, and we'll both be fine either way.
yeah,
And when I come in with that certainty, then I tend to be pretty magnetizing. But it takes like I actually have to work through some processes and some
yeah,
devices to get myself to that level of certainty.
yeah. So,
Yeah.
so if anyone out there is listening to this and they're on the edge and they
Yeah.
want to be better with money and they're really
Mm.
liking the message, what would you say to urge them to at least reach out to figure it
Yes.
out? How would you, what would you say to them?
Yeah. So if you want to like get in touch with me and you want to learn how I do things, I'm on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. You can find me at Wealth with Abby, ABI. And that's Instagram and TikTok. And then on Facebook, I'm just Abi Levine, my name, Abilevine. And those are going to be some really great places where you can kind of fence it and just kind of see what I'm about. We've moved into an era where people are not necessarily pressing buy on day one. So,
Yeah,
just come and take a look at some of my stuff. I've got this amazing science of manifestation game that like walks you through all of the science behind manifestation from an embodied experience so you can actually feel how it's going to feel when you have all the money that you want or
yeah,
need. And that's in my bio, so definitely check that out for
yeah.
sure.
So, of everyone out there,
Mm.
we have this list of people that have all kinds of money.
Yeah.
On that list, who do you admire the most for the way that they carry themselves, help people, their take care of their employees? Who is that
Yes.
wealthy person you admire?
Oprah. It's Oprah. Like the way that Oprah has conducted herself, the
Yeah,
way that never she never bent on her boundaries. She is so sovereign. I'm certain that she was confronted with a lot of difficult choices that would have perhaps made her even more money. But she stuck to her guns. She uses like everything about her is leveraged to make the world a better place.
yeah,
Um, and I think that that's really beautiful. And she doesn't do it from a place of martyrdom. She does it from a place of strength.
yeah,
Yeah, I really respect that.
yeah, absolutely. So, Abby, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for your story. I really appreciate it. Have a wonderful holiday season and an even better 2025.
Yes, you do the same. Thank you so much for
Thank you.
having
I
me.
appreciate it. All right.